Good to be with you. Tim Matting, Director of the North American Division Evangelism Institute. This has been an exciting week, and you know that throughout this week there have been people that you're thinking should have been here. Get them here next year. It's that critical. All right, so I'm going to tell you about the very first church I planted. It was in Washington State. It was out of the Lacey Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is located in Olympia, Washington, the state capital. And whenever I go back to Washington State and I talk about my very first church plant, I ask how many people of you know about the South Sound Seventh-day Adventist Church. And they'll look at each other like, I don't think I know where that church is. And I say, of course not, because they closed. And my first church plant failed. It did many great things. It was considered by many to be a success, but in 3 years, they closed the doors. Now, we spent almost a year equipping and training the core team. I had about 40-some people of my core team, most all of them from the mother church. We spent a year weekly meeting together, equipping and training my core team, and when we launched with about 150 people in attendance. Within a year, we were up to over 200 people in regular attendance. We were renting this brand new Baptist church. It was a little bit bigger sanctuary than this, and it was just this full, exciting feeling. It was vibrant. In all up to this point, almost 2 years into this experience, it was a successful church plant. But about this time, we were reaching new people, baptizing people, a lot of new people coming. We're out engaged and serving in the community and bringing back former Adventists. And it was vibrant. It was exciting. It's like we felt like we were accomplishing the book of Acts. And then my head elder and his wife come to me and say, Tim, we've got some bad news. It's like, what's the bad news? My wife, she has got a promotion. And so we're going to be moving to the state of Oregon. Now, the head elder was my head elder, and he was also my personal ministries director. So all our outreach and evangelism strategy, he organized and ran. His wife was my Sabbath school superintendent. So she oversaw all the children's Sabbath school classes, organized that, equipped and trained all the people how to do all that, etc. Just oversaw that whole thing. And she was my church clerk. And so in one moment, in one conversation, I lost 4 key leaders. 4 key positions were vacated. And I was devastated. I was happy for them. We're still good friends. Just hung out with them just a few weeks ago. Still good friends. Happy for them, but it devastated us. I didn't know what to do. So I went as quickly as possible to try to find people that could help in this process. And what I realized is that I had not effectively equipped and trained new leaders. I had equipped and trained people to do a specific task, but not to buy into an overall vision and mission, etc. And we were not doing regular evaluations to see how we were doing at accomplishing our mission effectiveness. We had built massive amount of energy into a launch, and in all appearances, it looked strong. It looked great, but it actually started to become weak because we had spent massive energy to launch, and we're doing nothing for a regular evaluation to see how we could continue to maintain. So with that said, I want to talk about 2 subjects. First, I want to talk about doing regular evaluation once you've launched, so that because you spend so much time as a church planter leading up to a plant. Once you launch, now what? Now you are a church, and what you don't want to do is you just fall into a comfortable zone. All of your energy has been driven towards launch day. Now launch is past, and you have to continue that emphasis. And the second thing I want to talk about this afternoon, I think I'm back at 4 o'clock this afternoon, is how to equip and train new leaders so that when somebody moves, and somebody will move, somebody will leave, that you're not devastated and the momentum can continue. So we're talking about those 2 things in our time together today. So first, let's talk about those regular health checkups. How are we doing? Once we've launched, how do we maintain growth and structure from there? It begins by first clarifying our mission. What is our mission? Why do we exist? Now, you should be doing this as a core team leading up to your launch. Why? The answer to this question is why you're planting this church. But you can never lose focus of the mission. There is a reality called mission drift. This is a reality. I tell church planters this, and many of them don't believe me until it happens to them. So I'm telling you, it happens. You lead up all this energy to launch this new church, and you have this core team that is excited. They're mission driven. They're incarnational. They want to share the gospel with others. They're externally focused. But a day after your grand opening, the momentum changes inward. And they immediately start to become inward focused. And you'll hear conversations coming up about, why don't we do this ministry? And that ministry is for us. And, if you have a budget, we can't afford it. Well, let's stop doing this out in the community and do this. Like, where's this coming from? It happens. So you have to be aware of it and constantly coming back and clarifying why we exist is critical. Now, you clarify your mission, whatever your mission is. I think the mission should be based on Matthew chapter 28 and the process of making disciples. I think our mission should be to make disciples. But you got to come up with whatever your mission is. The mission that you had when you were launching, you need to constantly be coming back to that, constantly be reviewing that. And if necessary, even recontextualizing it if you have to. But it's always in the forefront. It's always the drive. It's always the push. It's always saying, why do we exist? What is our purpose? Why are we here? That has to always be at the foundation. So once you've done that, we need to make sure, and we've done this, right? So we're kind of talking post-launch day. You've done this up to the grand opening or the launch. You've been doing this, but you need to maintain this and continue this after. And that is making sure that everybody knows why we are existing. Everybody knows what our mission is. I love what Ellen White says. The members of the church should give diligent attention to the word of God that they may understand their duty and then labor with all their energies of mind and heart to make their church one of the most prosperous in the land. So you'll notice that she's saying that it begins by the members of the church. This is not just the pastor, not just the church planter. It's everybody in the church giving diligent attention to the word of God. That's God's word. It's his Bible. Reading the Bible, reading the book of Acts, and etc. And then what they're looking for is to understand what their duty is. Why do we exist? Once we understand what that is, then we all work together with all of our energies to focus on that. And when we do that, God is going to bless us. So once we have, so the key is we have to always be driven by our mission. And we always need to make sure that everybody understands our mission. If that gets off, and it will get off, if you don't keep it focused, it will get off. It'll drive off, especially as you're reaching new people who come from other churches, other Adventist churches, other denominations, other former and inactive Adventists who, when they come back, haven't been back in 20 years to the church, and they come back, and in their heart, they love the church, but they also remember 20 years ago what they loved about church, and they want to do that where you're at now. But we don't do that now, here. And the reason is because we're focused on our mission. And in order to do our mission, we're not about this particular methodology or this program. And so the forces are going to constantly be pulling to get off mission. So we need to stay mission focused as the leader and all of our leaders and our members in the church. So constantly focusing on that. Now, when you've launched your church, you created various different ministries. You have different systems in the church. You have different leaders in the church. You hopefully, when you have launched, right? So this is advanced, so it's kind of assumed that you've done this in the beginners, that when you launch, all of your ministries, whatever ministries you are doing, are all in alignment with this mission. Right? Now, those of us who've pastored existing churches, that's not always the case. Ministries in the church have their own mission. And sometimes those ministries compete against each other. Right? They're at odds with each other because they have different missions. When you're launching, all of these are all working together for the same mission and the same purpose. And it's critical that you keep them on mission. So you want to create alignment in your ministries and in your systems. I like how Ellen White says, the work you are engaged in cannot be done except by forces which are the result of well understood plans. So when you have leaders, and eventually new leaders, and equipping new people, whatever ministry you are choosing to do, your Sabbath school, your children's ministries, your small group ministries, your outreach programs, whatever it is, whatever ministries, whatever functions you are doing, we have to clarify that this is why they exist. This is why we do this. Master Plan of Evangelism, Lau Coleman, I like this. He says, merely because we're busy or even skilled doing something does not necessarily mean that we're getting anything accomplished. The question must always be asked, is it worth doing, and does it get the job done? Are our efforts to keep things going fulfilling the Great Commission of Christ? That we are busy in the church, trying to work one program of evangelism after another cannot be denied, but are we accomplishing our objective? So we need to clarify, starts by clarifying what is our objective, what is our mission? And then we make sure that all of the various systems and ministries of the church remain in alignment with that mission. Hopefully you had that when you launched, but we need to maintain that as we grow, right? So when we're looking to maintain or create system alignment, we need to make sure that every system and every ministry of the church is committed to the common mission, committed to a common strategy, and a commitment to a process of regular review and organizational learning. So just because I have empowered my Sabbath school superintendent, and this is perfect following Steve's presentation, we want to do that. We want to empower them to do that. We want to make sure that they are empowered not to take this off as their own thing. This is something we are doing in the church in order to fulfill our mission as a church. This is not your own kingdom that you're building. That you develop your own vision and your own strategy and your own purpose and your own mission, et cetera, and create your own power that you run these people. That is not what we're doing. So in order to do that, we make sure that every system and ministry is committed to the same mission and strategy and regular review and organizational learning. So here's the reality. Once you launch, you want to make sure that you stay mission focused. Now, those churches that are not necessarily new or haven't taken the time to do this struggle because churches, generally speaking, have bought into a ministry menu philosophy. Churches feel constant pressure to provide programs on the basis of needs. And individuals have been allowed to build their identity around a program, not a mission. And church leaders fear the fallout of eliminating certain programs. So when you launch, your church is going to want to start moving in this direction. Why? Because that's how every other church is. And as you're reaching new people and bringing new people on board, they want to have the programs. They let's say for the sake of illustration, you launch your church, do your church however you're going to do it. But let's say for the sake of illustration only, that in your church you only do 3 things. You have exceptional Sabbath worship experience. You have a small group ministry where your discipleship strategy occurs. And you serve the community. Let's just say for that illustration, that's all you do. Now you're going to have people joining the church. And the reason you do that, just so that we're all kind of in the same, and I'm not saying you should do this or have to do this. I'm just saying as an example. And everything that you do for discipleship happens in the small groups. and you come together corporately to worship, where you have, Sabbath school or worship experience for kids too, etc. But you come together for that worship, but everything happens in the small groups. All your discipleship happens in small groups. And as a church, you are actively serving the community, engage in systemic issues like poverty and education and human trafficking, etc., and other kind of servant evangelism things where you're just kind of going out and showing God's love in a practical way with no strings attached. But now as you're reaching new people, and new people are coming into the church, and you're empowering new leaders, there are people who are going to say, we need to have a women's ministries. We need to do AY. We need to be doing prayer meeting. Well, no, let's wait until the pastor goes on vacation for 3 weeks, and then we'll start prayer meeting, right? Because they're coming with all of these things to do, and Adventism in general is menu driven. Do stuff for me. Do stuff for me. I want you to have programs for me. And you need to make sure that you're staying aligned to the mission. Otherwise, you just become a program-driven church, taking care of the members that already exist and are no longer externally focused, and you end up falling into that 61% of the churches in the North American division that are plateaued or declined. Now, I'm not saying you need to do those three things. You do however you want to do it, and I'm not against women's ministries or AY or any of those things. You decide how you're going to fulfill your mission and what programs and systems and ministries you're going to do to accomplish that, and you focus on that. And we make sure all of our ministries stay in alignment with that. So here's generally the 8 systems of the church. Every church has these 8 systems in the church. Right? You have a worship experience, you do something for evangelism, you're assimilating new members, you have some kind of small groups, whether it's just Sabbath school only, you have some ministry of how you place people into ministry, nominating committee, for example, some kind of stewardship program where people are giving, you're allocating funds, you're thanking people for giving, you're providing the tax document at the end of the year, leadership and your equipping of new leaders, you have elders and deacons and etc. And you have some kind of a strategic plan. What are we doing to move forward? It might just be whatever the pastor tells us to do or whatever the matriarch tells us to do. You have something for this. What we want to make sure is that when we are launching and post-launch, that all of these systems stay in alignment with our mission and strategic plan, our strategy, how we are fulfilling our mission, vision, discipleship, pathway, etc. We want to make sure they stay in alignment with that, recognizing that there's going to be a propensity to go back to the way things used to be. So we want to make sure when we create these and when we're constantly evaluating them, they stay in alignment. Now, you might have any kind of ministries in your church. I've just thrown up, I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do any of these. I just want to illustrate you might have these ministries that you may choose to have in your church. So let's say for the sake of illustration, you choose to have a health ministry in your church plant. We want to make sure that the health ministry is in alignment with our mission. Because I've seen it where health ministries and children's ministries and our Adventist school and other community services actually compete against each other. We don't want that to happen. So whatever ministries you choose to have, again, this is just kind of get you thinking, that those ministries are in alignment with our mission and our strategy. So let me illustrate it here. So for the sake of illustration, this time together is not talking about a discipleship pathway. We've talked about that in other classes. You can find it on ALC where we talk about the discipleship pathway. But for the sake of illustration, in this illustration, our mission is to make disciples. And we've articulated that how we make a disciple is in 4 steps. All right? Connecting people with God, each other, the community, and a life of spiritual growth. And there's a lot in each one of those words, okay? But what we're going to do before and after launch is we are going to look at our leadership system and say, how does our leadership system help us fulfill our mission of connecting people with God, each other, the community, and a life of spiritual growth? We're going to look at our small groups ministries and say, how is this ministry helping fulfill our mission of connecting people with God, each other, the community, and the life of spiritual growth. We're going to look at our children's ministries and ask that same thing. And then from here forward, as we evaluate each of our systems, and like evangelism system, and our ministries, if we have a social committee, and we're constantly asking, how are you helping to fulfill these things? Because this is how we are fulfilling the mission in this church. Then, after launch, we engage in regular strategic planning. We've launched, we're excited, God is blessing us, but we're still moving forward. Your energy has been driven towards a launch day. Now it needs to be driven towards the next phase. You're now a church, maybe a group or a company, but you've launched as a community of faith. What is your next step? So you had all of these goals, this massive list of everything you need to do up to the launch. Now you are repurposing your mission to say, what is our next step? So this is part of strategic planning. And essentially, strategic planning is this ongoing process of regular review and organizational learning. It's asking, how are we doing at fulfilling our mission? And strategic planning, a lot of stuff on strategic planning. I do a lot of teaching on strategic planning. It's cool, it's great. It's not complex. All strategic planning is asking 3 questions. Where are we now? Where do we need to go? And what steps do we need to take to get there? That's it. That's all it is. It does not have to be complex. But first thing you need to know is, where are you now? Which means we have to do some self-reflecting. We need to look at our mission, our strategy, or our discipleship pathway. We need to look at the ministries and everything we do and ask, how is it? Is it healthy? We have an assimilation process with our greeters and our hospitality team and how we do that. How is it doing? Is it helping us fulfill our mission? What you don't want is to enter into a level of complacency, which often happens after the grand opening. You enter into this level of complacency, and all of a sudden your greeters, who were once acting as hosts, excited about welcoming new people into the community, and now have all of a sudden, 6 months after the launch, are just saying, happy Sabbath, glad you're here, here's a bulletin, and moving on. No, we don't want that. So we have to be willing to honestly ask, where are we now? What is our current health situation? And then say, where do we need to go? Where do we need to take the next step in this process? And once we say, this is where we are, this is where we need to go, what do we need to do between now? What are the next steps we need to do to get here? It's that simple. I mean, there's a lot of work involved in it, but it's that simple. So in order to do this, we're looking essentially these 3 things. Evaluate each step of your discipleship process. This assumes you have a discipleship strategy. If you don't, whatever the ministry areas that you have, look at your various different ministries and strategies, like your evangelism system and ministry system and your small groups, etc. Evaluate each one of them and then set challenging but realistic goals for a ministry period. Maybe 6 to 12 months. So you're looking at your hospitality ministry. How is it actually doing? It's good. However, we can improve in these areas. So over the next 6 to 12 months, to help our hospitality assimilation ministry go to the next level, we're going to focus on these things. And you're setting realistic goals for that ministry period, and you develop key initiatives for each step in the process. So let me illustrate. In this illustration, again, we're using a discipleship pathway that has those 4 steps: connecting with God, each other, the community, and life of spiritual growth. You don't have to have that. You can just have your various different ministries or your strategy in place. But for the sake of illustration, this is how we're doing this. So in this illustration, we're looking at the first step of our discipleship pathway, which is connecting people with God, which essentially is to lead people to Christ and active involvement in the local church. This is our evangelism strategy. Right? So if you don't have a discipleship pathway, I'd encourage you to have one. But if you don't, and you certainly should have an evangelism strategy, we're asking ourselves, how are we doing at this? So what is our goal? Please do not get distracted by the numbers, all right? People see numbers and like, oh, that's way too much, or that's not enough, whatever. Don't get distracted by the numbers. Just the principle is what I want to focus on. So in order to do this, we're setting a 2-year period in this illustration. So this says 25, but in our case, it'd probably be December of 27, all right? 2 years from now. In order for us to be more effective in our evangelism strategy, or in this case, connecting people to God, bringing them to baptism, our goal is to see 50 people in our church by baptism or profession of faith by the end of this 2-year period. That's a goal that we have. In order to do that, we need to change some things. And we've identified in this illustration 2 things that we need to focus on. The first is to evaluate and strengthen our hospitality process. This is our greeter ministry, our assimilation system, etc., because we want to make sure that we're connecting with people. People are connecting with us when they come in. We get their contact information. We're following up. We're letting them know we're here to help them and connect them to the church and Jesus Christ, etc. So we're going to evaluate it because we recognize it's not where it needs to be, and we're going to strengthen it. And we're going to do this over the next 6 to 12 months. We think that if we can evaluate and strengthen our hospitality process, it will help our first step of our discipleship process or our evangelism strategy become more effective. And when it becomes more effective, it'll help us reach our goal of baptizing 50 people. We also have developing a yearly evangelistic calendar with a reaping series. This is just an illustration. You kind of got to figure out where you are. Right? And we figure if we can, over the next 2 years, from 25 to 27, focus on these 2 things over the next 6 to 12 months, then we will be more effective at bringing people to Christ and more apt to make our goal. And we do this for each step of our our discipleship pathway, connecting people with God, each other, the community, and a life of spiritual growth. And you could have it for your systems or your ministries, however you want to do this. And what you end up having is for the next 6 to 12 months, what are we focusing on? These things here. This is what we're focusing on. And the focus is to become more effective at fulfilling our discipleship strategy. That's what our focus is. And it's only for the next 6 to 12 months. So when I sit down with my church board, what do we talk about? We talk about this. Or your ministry team, or however you want to word it. We use ministry team, and eventually we move over to the church board, but that's much later. Another conversation. But this is our focus. This is what we focus on. Every time we get together, what does we talk about as a church board? This. This is what we talk about. It's our discipleship strategy. And then when we have accomplished one of the tasks within that 6 to 12 months, say by 7 months, then we say, what do we need to do to help bring this up next level? What's the next thing we need to do to help become stronger? And now we're growing. There are more people now, right? We started off with 40 or 50 people. Now we have 70, 80 people. So we need to add more classes. In order for people to connect with each other, we need more Sabbath school classes or more small groups. In order to do that, we need to have more small group leaders. So over the next 6 to 12 months, we need to be more intentional about equipping and training more small group leaders, because that's where discipleship occurs. And we focus on developing a system of small group leaders, developing new small group leaders over the next 6 to 12 months. So as we grow, more people can be plugged into small groups, or whichever, however we choose to do this. As a result of that, we become more effective at fulfilling our mission. And the focus of our leadership is always about the mission. And it keeps everything to stay in alignment. Now, this document, we will vote this as leaders in the church. Right? We'll do a business meeting, and we'll vote this. And when we vote this, if you ever have somebody, like one of those elders somebody asked about, who says, I don't want to do this stuff. Their conflict is not with you. Their conflict is with the church. Because this is what the church has decided to do. They either get in alignment with the church or go to another church. Because this is what we as a church have decided to do, because we're focused on the mission. All right, I'll take some questions.